All right, so let's dive into something a little bit uncomfortable, maybe choking. You
Sure.
know, it's not something we really like to think about, but we're going to be looking at a podcast episode. It's called "Home Alone and Choking: How to Handle It Yourself," and it's one of those things you don't think about until you need it, but knowing what to do in that moment could literally save your life.
Absolutely. And this episode, it really does a nice job of highlighting how important it is to recognize what true choking looks like. Because, those first few seconds, those can be critical.
So, can we unpack that a little bit? How do we know if we're dealing with just a cough or if it's a real
Well,
emergency?
even a forceful cough, that actually means that the airway isn't completely blocked. So your body's still doing its job trying to clear whatever the obstruction is.
Hmm.
But if you see someone suddenly go silent,
Uh-huh.
they're unable to breathe or speak, and you see that classic, grabbing at the throat, that's a very clear signal that the airway is blocked and they can't get air.
Yeah, that paints a pretty scary picture. So let's say you find yourself alone and choking. What is this podcast? What does it recommend that you do?
Well, that's where the self-Heimlich maneuver comes in.
Hmm.
And it's a technique that can be surprisingly effective in actually dislodging the object.
Yeah, it sounds a little intimidating. Is it hard to do?
No, not at all. Actually, it's pretty simple. So you start by making a fist with one hand and placing it right above your belly button. And then you grasp that fist with your other hand. And then you're going to thrust inward and upward, kind of like you're trying to lift yourself.
I'm guessing you need to use quite a bit of force.
You do, yeah. The idea is to create enough pressure
Yeah.
to force that object out. And the episode even recommends that you repeat those thrusts until you actually feel the object dislodge. But they also mention an alternative method if you need a little bit more leverage.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, you can use a piece of furniture, like a sturdy chair or the edge of a counter. And you position yourself so that the edge is just above your belly button. And you use that same thrusting motion against the object.
It sounds pretty intense, but I imagine it's a pretty small price to pay, in a life or death situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a better outcome than losing consciousness.
Right.
And speaking of losing consciousness, the podcast highlights a really crucial point, that even if you manage to dislodge the object yourself, you should always call emergency services afterwards.
That makes sense. Why is that so important?
Well, because even if you're breathing again, there's still a chance that there could be some internal injury, to your throat or airway. And it's always better to err on the side of caution and get checked out.
Good point. What if you start to feel faint before you're able to dislodge the object?
The episode actually recommends making as much noise as possible. So, bang on the walls, knock things over, anything to try and attract attention.
So it's really about thinking strategically and doing whatever it takes to survive.
Exactly. It's about staying calm, remembering these techniques, and acting decisively.
This is a great reminder that we all have the power to potentially save our own lives.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it also, kind of speaks to the importance of learning these basic life-saving techniques. But, this podcast episode also dives into another crucial aspect, and that's preventing these situations in the first place. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it definitely makes you think about how we approach something as routine as eating.
Yeah.
The episode really stressed the importance of mindful eating, but what does that actually look like? I'm curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah, it's really about shifting our focus,
Yeah.
from just consuming food to actually being present during the process.
Mhm.
The episode had some great tips, things like, chewing slowly and thoroughly.
Yeah, that one always gets me. I'm a fast eater, I gotta admit.
I think we all have our habits. But
Mhm.
taking those extra few seconds to chew can make a big difference. It helps to break down the food into smaller pieces, which reduces the risk of choking, obviously.
So it's not just about table manners then. It's about safety too.
Exactly. And another thing the episode highlighted was avoiding distractions while eating.
Ugh, that's a tough one. So no more scrolling through my phone during lunch.
Well, it's worth considering because when we're distracted, we're not paying attention to, you know, what we're putting in our mouths or how we're chewing.
Yeah, I can see how that could lead to some problems. Are there any other simple changes we can make?
Well, the episode actually had some interesting advice
Right.
about being mindful of certain foods. So it mentioned things like, tough meats, grapes, hard candies, even peanut butter.
Peanut butter. Wow, I wouldn't have thought of that one.
Yeah, it's not about avoiding these foods altogether, but more about being aware of the potential hazards. So, cutting grapes into smaller pieces, chewing meat thoroughly,
Mm.
and maybe taking smaller bites of that peanut butter sandwich.
It's amazing how these small adjustments can really impact our safety.
It really is. And, these tips are especially relevant for people who live alone, which is a point the episode touched on.
Oh, right. They talked about letting someone know when you're eating. Why is that so important?
Well, it's about having that extra layer of security.
Right.
So if something were to happen, at least someone would know you were eating and they could potentially check in on you.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing, but it could make a world of difference. As we're going through all of this, it makes me realize we often overlook these basic safety measures.
I agree. I think we tend to focus on, the big dramatic emergencies, but sometimes it's the everyday situations that can really catch us off guard.
It's like having a toolkit, of essential life skills that we don't always prioritize.
Precisely. And I think this podcast episode did a really nice job of bringing that to light. It wasn't just about the mechanics of the self-Heimlich. It was about empowering us to be prepared.
Yeah, and that sense of preparedness can really make a difference in how we approach any situation.
Absolutely. It's about knowing what to do, staying calm, and taking action. But, beyond this specific scenario, I think there's a larger takeaway here.
I'm intrigued. What are you thinking? I'm intrigued. What are you thinking?
Well, this whole conversation we've been having, about choking and the self-Heimlich, it really got me thinking about other everyday scenarios where, just having that basic knowledge could be equally invaluable.
That's a really interesting point. Like, we've been focusing on, this one very specific situation, but there are so many other instances where being prepared could make a huge difference.
Exactly. What if more people just knew basic first aid? Or how to handle a power outage? Or how to change a tire? I mean, these are all skills that can really empower us to, take control in those unexpected situations.
It's almost like we need to, create this mental checklist of
Yeah.
essential life skills, things that, might not come up every day, but that we should all kind of have in our back pockets.
I love that analogy. And it goes beyond, just those practical skills too. What about mental preparedness? Knowing how to manage stress in a crisis, how to stay calm under pressure. I mean, those are just as vital.
It's almost like we're talking about building this, resilience toolkit, one that equips us to handle whatever life throws our way.
That's a perfect way to put it. And I think this deep dive, even though it started with a, rather specific topic, it's really highlighted the importance of that broader sense of preparedness.
Absolutely. It's been a fascinating journey. We've gone from, the mechanics of the self-Heimlich to a much deeper conversation about personal empowerment and the value of knowledge.
And I think that's a great place to leave our listeners. This episode wasn't just about learning a life-saving technique. It was about sparking that curiosity, to learn more, to explore those everyday skills that can make us feel more confident and prepared to face whatever comes our way.
So as we wrap up, I'd encourage everyone listening to think about what other skills or knowledge, they might want to add to their own resilience toolkit. What can you learn today that might make a difference tomorrow?
It's a great question to ponder. Knowledge really is power. And it's never too late to start building your own personal toolkit, for navigating life's unexpected challenges.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Stay curious and stay prepared out there.